Hello Physical Fiends, it is coming to the end of the calendar year and the Nintendo Switch has been out for just over 6 months now. I think I'm going to make an annual attempt at dealing all the physical releases over each year, and of course we're going to start with 2025. It's been a bumpy road so far, from the mystery surrounding the Switch 2, the worry over game keys, and then the hope at the end of the tunnel with smaller cartridge sizes. It's not been easy, but it's been interesting. All we can do is celebrate and support what is out there, so let's jump in with every proper Nintendo Switch 2 physical release this year. No game keys are included. Mario Kart World was the big launch title. In fact, it was bundled with most Switch 2 consoles out there. I have it myself. The open world thing is kind of interesting, and the long racetracks are also really interesting too. However, I don't know, there's something about it that I kind of prefer Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. How about you out there? What do you think of it? Of course, it is the biggest selling Switch 2 release so far, and it's certainly worth having if you like some competitive action. If you got multiplayer with friends, you like playing online, then this will be a game for you. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, and the even longer titled The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Nintendo Switch 2 Edition were two easy launch titles for Nintendo, two of the Switch's biggest and most ambitious games, now running perfect, playing nicer with small additional content. The physical release was mostly hampered by two things. One, the price, and secondly, millions and millions and millions of people already own these two games and didn't need to buy them again. They could just upgrade digitally. So as cool as they are, they weren't wholly necessary for the majority of people who didn't want to shell out $70 for a game they likely already have. Fantastic for newcomers though, in fact essential. So much content over 2 cartridges. Cyberpunk 2077 was the Great Red Hope, a third-party title that wasn't a Switch 2 edition. It's on a proper cartridge. That is pricey, but thankfully CD Projekt Red had the money to risk it. And I think it paid off at launch, since more people bought it physically than digitally. That's fantastic support for such an important release, and it's a good port of a supposedly great game, something for a more mature seeking audience too, and nicely showed off the power possibilities of the Nintendo Switch 2 console. Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma Nintendo Switch 2 Edition feels like the teenager who managed to sneak his way into a nightclub. Of all the launch proper Switch 2 physicals, this is the one that stands out. Of the 5, it does feel kinda out of place, like it couldn't believe its luck for being among some gigantic releases, but this is fantastic because this is no slouch either. It might be from a smaller publisher with a smaller budget, but this is a fantastic game that's a great return to form for the series. It's what Rune Factory 5 should have been, and it's so good it appeared in my top 15 games of the year, well, voted by you, Physical Fiends, and those were the launch titles. It was a short while before we got any new physicals come out, but the first post-launch Switch 2 physical was in Japan. Tamagotchi Plaza Nintendo Switch 2 Edition released to muted appreciation. This also released physically on the Nintendo Switch in Europe, but this Nintendo Switch 2 Edition was exclusive to Japan. But it does play in English, and it did sell pretty well, better than all the game key releases in Japan put together, which is nice, and we can laugh at them like, haha, crappy game keys. The game itself is just a minigame collection that kids may enjoy if they want something cutesy. Donkey Kong Bananza was Nintendo's big hope for single-player content. It was their Mario Odyssey for the Switch 2, and many people loved it. It appeared in the Games of the Year video that I did. You guys voted for it pretty high, and it's an interesting 3D platformer for people of all ages can enjoy. Is it as mind-blowing as some other games from the Mario 3D team? No, but for a Nintendo Switch 2 physical, you can bet it's essential. And by the way, if you want to purchase any of these games, then please do so via the links in the description. You can purchase from VGP for the Western retail releases or Play Asia for the imports, and that is the best way to support me and this channel in the best way possible. I do truly thank you ever so much from the bottom of my heart. Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Jamboree TV filled the early gap in the physical releases. This popular Switch title now includes content to, well, basically sell that camera peripheral. Did anyone buy that? And if you did, have you used it? Let me know. Am I just a miserable sod who would never in a million years consider having my ugly mug in a game. Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time Nintendo Switch 2 edition, came a bit later after the original Switch and PlayStation 5 release, but an incredibly solid addition to anyone's Switch 2 library. It runs super nicely, looks great, and is already one of my favorite games on the system. In fact, it was my personal game of the year. A great mix of different things, but at its core, a simple action RPG, but with so much fluff around it that somehow it actually works. It feels like the level 5 I used to know and love. Just like the Switch and PlayStation 5 physical, this Nintendo Switch 2 edition is an import exclusive. You can only get it from Japan, however, it does play in English, and I 100% recommend it. Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar Nintendo Switch 2 edition, another banger and another return to form. Okay, I don't think the Story of Seasons franchise has been in a lull or anything, but this in particular sticks out very, very well compared to some other ones. It is a brilliant rendition of a gaming genre that's become immensely popular over the years, and this is one of the best that I played. I thought I was all cozied out, but this remake of a DS game pulls everything together so well. I really enjoyed my time with this. Of course, it's also on the Switch, but if you want a better performing and looking version, then the Nintendo Switch 2 edition is well worth your time. Momotaro Densetsu 2 Anata no Machi mo Kitu Aru Nintendo Switch 2 edition. This might be the longest official name for a Nintendo Switch 2 physical so far. This is a Switch 2 edition of a very popular party game in Japan. Sadly, it does not have English, but it's still a good thing because, as I said, the series is absolutely huge in the country, and to have that as a proper physical, that is a good boost for the medium. Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 edition plus Star-Crossed World. I still have not picked this up. I already own the original version on Switch, but I do love this game. One of my favorite Kirby games, and one of the first games me and my daughter played together in co-op. Really fantastic bonding time, and now she's like 7.5, and this helped her really become a little gamer in herself. I'm sure we'd love to have a great time revisiting this classic now with extra content, more levels and power-ups, and of course looking even more gorgeous than before. Daemon Ex Machina Titanic Scion is a mecha action game that was one of the first proper Switch 2 physicals announced, part of the trio from Marvelous. This one is actually a bona fide Switch 2 physical, more expensive than a Switch 2 edition. It was a bold move for the publisher, and in fact the West is a proper cartridge, whereas Japan, they stuck with a game key there. The game itself is pretty decent. It reminds me of Xenoblade Chronicles X a lot. Certainly not essential, but a fun time if you enjoy the genre and can get past some of the jank. Pokemon Legends ZA for Nintendo Switch 2 edition is a big release for the Switch 2, a Pokemon game on Switch 2. Okay, it's also available on the original Switch, which made it, have less impact, but we all know about Game Freak these days, and the extra horsepower of the Switch 2 can go a long way, so this is the preferred physical to pick up. A sequel to one of the franchise's more interesting recent entries, this got a lot of stick from more hardcore gamers who only seem to have just discovered how the Pokemon Company roll, but I think after the release window, once that furore had died down, your more average, less emotional gamer found it to be a pretty fun entry, and the Switch 2 physical sold very well, even in competition with the OG Switch. Not quite equal, but, very solid. Majogami is another import exclusive, and it's not even a Switch 2 edition. The Switch 2 cartridge only plays on the Switch 2. Indie creators seem to be going back and forth in how they are handling their Switch 2 releases. I don't think this sold a significant amount to create enough waves, but from an indie publisher, I hope it did well, but signs aren't all that good, because indie crates are supporting the Switch 2 differently, because their next release is going to be a Nintendo Switch 2 edition rather than a bona fide Switch 2 release, and then the one after that is skipping the Switch 2 altogether. They're just sticking with the original Switch for the physical release. So if you want to support it and you want a solid indie action platformer, maybe consider importing. It plays in English, and I think maybe Sonic fans will enjoy this one. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment started off a packed end of the year for the Switch 2, a Switch 2 exclusive release getting all in on the Masu action, Dynasty Warriors but with furries, and Zelda. Apparently this one is now canon, but for me, I don't play these games for the stories, at least not a linear narrative, but this got decent reviews. It's sitting at 79 on Metacritic. I've not heard much about it since its release, but if you want some mindless, cathartic action, button mashing, taking down thousands of moblins, it might be a good one to turn your mind off to. Kirby Air Riders is a Switch 2 exclusive release. It's insane they released it within 6 months of Mario Kart World. Despite being cutesy, it's probably a lot more technical and hardcore than Mario Kart. If you've played a couple of Sakurai games before, you know when you're playing a Sakurai game. Even if they're a completely different genre, they somehow feel the same. The original was underrated by critics, but I think this got boosted by Sakurai's name now that he's more famous, and it appears to be more of the same, just expanded a bit more, and that's a good thing. You get a few game modes, addictive short gameplay, and you just want to play them over and over again. I'm looking forward to giving this a try someday. Hades 2 Nintendo Switch 2 Edition is probably the biggest indie Switch 2 physical release out there. Despite being a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, there is no Switch physical. This is the only physical release out there, but of course it will work on your original Switch, so even those who haven't upgraded to a Switch 2 yet will still want to add this to their collection. A huge mainstream success, this has already been a very popular physical release. In my weekly community spotlight, I've seen this about 10 times as much as Kirby Air Riders, which released on the same day. Action roguelike from the masters. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition. Wow, it's been a controversial year. There's always been a bit of a pushback on social media about almost every Switch 2 game this year to varying degrees, but I don't think even Pokemon got as much pushback as Metroid Prime 4 did. Prime fans have waited like almost 20 years for this, and they were not happy. While your average gamer found this to be a fine enough FPS action exploration game, the more serious Prime fans felt quite disappointed, missing the magic that the series was known for. I don't know, since I've not played it myself, but physical fiends, let me know in the comments below your thoughts. Speaking of which, if you're not a physical fiend, you should be. Start the new year right by subscribing to this channel. It's for the best. You get all the important updates on all the physical releases, and you can support the medium by making this channel bigger. Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection is a release that I've had so much fun with this year. I didn't vote for it in my game of the year, but I've had an absolute blast going through the classic Mortal Kombat games. This one also took a bit of a beating at launch due to poor online. That didn't bother me since I would never play these games online, but also for input lag, which I personally did not experience. It's not been helped by the fact that the Switch and Switch 2 physicals have Mortal Kombat 4 missing. The port wasn't finished when they had to start cartridge production. Of course, it's downloadable in a patch, but it has mod what I find to be a great release. A-Train All Aboard Tourism Nintendo Switch 2 Edition is another import exclusive. It's the third version of this game. The previous two were on the original Switch. This adds mouse support and much needed boost in power and performance when your city starts to get big and busy. It won't chug anymore. This plays in English, and it might be the most obscure Switch 2 physical out there, at least for now. Yooka-Replaylee, I absolutely love this game. I voted for it in my game of the year. It's everything I'd want in a modern 3D collectathon platformer. It's a remake of Yooka-Laylee, but making it what it should have originally been. I didn't play the original incarnation, but this was just so much fun. If you like Banjo-Kazooie, you should be picking this up. Is it as good? No, but it's close enough to make me happy and not miserable about, modern gaming. It's fun, colorful, the collectibles are interesting, the mechanics are fun, and it's always throwing up something new. Definitely worth it. And those are all the Nintendo Switch 2 physical releases for 2025. Join me after Christmas, where I will detail all the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 physical releases for 2026. There are quite a lot, and it's going to be an interesting year from what we know so far. Subscribe if you want to purchase any of these games. Please do so via the links in the description. Honestly, that helps me so much and makes it worth doing this channel, working so hard for you guys with daily videos. At least I try. And yeah, have a fantastic day, have a fantastic Christmas, and yeah, take care.